My name is Deborah Wallace. Millions of lives are changed for the better by the compassion and dedication of police officers who are committed to helping people who need them the most. This is why I was proud to call myself a police officer.
Detective Superintendent Deborah Wallace rose to the top of the New South Wales Police Force with grace, humour and an iconic sense of style.
The person that was shot is known to police.
In her incredible 37 years in the force,
Police search warrant!
Wallace took on murderers, drug suppliers and bikie gangs.
All cases can be solved. They're never cold. And you never give up. In this series of million-dollar murders, we're taking you inside active investigations. Some of Australia's most challenging murder mysteries, where police have posted a $1 million reward for information from you, the public, to help bring convictions. The first case we're examining is the 1991 murder of Amanda Burns. Amanda had so much to live for, but she was brutally bashed to death in the dead of night.
And she was a very little girl, but she would have fought like a tiger.
Who killed Amanda Burns? A random stranger or someone she knew?
That's the big question, isn't it?
Tonight, Victoria Police has an important announcement to make.
The Chief Commissioner has approved a $1 million reward.
This is a live police investigation. With your help, we can bring Amanda's killer to justice. Elwood Park in Melbourne. It's just a few minutes down the road from St Kilda, right on the eastern shore of Port Phillip Bay. I'm heading to a specific location this morning. My journey starts on a public road that cuts through the park. Then I divert through a short bush track to emerge on the other side into a section of lawn behind the cricket nets. "30 years ago, a killer chose this very spot to coldly dump his victim on the grass.
The woman was bashed to death between midnight and dawn. Her body found this morning at 6:30 by a couple walking through Elwood Park.
On the 7th of April, 1991, I believe that you became involved in a homicide. Do you recall that one?
Yeah, I do. I got the phone call and attended at Elwood Park. There we located the body of Amanda Burns.
What do you recall about the crime scene?
Well, the crime scene was unique, if that's the right word. She had horrific injuries to her face, completely naked, apart from a fingerless glove on her right hand. And she had some strange lacerations to a lot of her body. They were just round cuts. It was a theory that maybe these round divot marks in her body were done with a wad cutter. And if you know what a wad cutter is, a leather tool. She'd been hit with whatever this instrument was on the earlobe, and one of her earlobes was missing.
Thank you for coming today.
Thank you.
Can you tell us who you are and why you're here?
My name's Kez. I'm Amanda Burns' sister.
Can you tell me about Amanda?
She was fun-loving, cheeky, a daredevil, fiercely loyal to her brother and I. I miss her all the time. Like, she's just there all the time. She's just there.
How did you find out the events?
I worked at the time at the markets in St Kilda. And it was sort of getting on in the day. Somebody at the next stalls had said it was a really weird night last night. St Kilda Town Hall had caught on fire. And then somebody else said, and there's an unidentified body found. And it sort of, I don't know, I sort of felt a bit funny about really. And I just sort of shook that off.
Kez was used to seeing her younger sister Amanda on market day. She would always arrive with a coffee in hand. Sometimes Amanda also came with her girlfriend Carol. But on this day, Carol turned up alone.
Carol arrived at the market and saying to me, "Has Manda been in? Have you seen Manda?" And I said, "No." She said she didn't come home last night. Now, Carol looked very shaken, which I thought was a bit odd. She looked frightened and grey.
Kez was so spooked, she packed up her stall, rang her fiancé and told him they were heading straight to St Kilda Police Station.
I said, "Oh, it's probably nothing, but I'd just like to let you know, can't find my sister." They asked me to sit down. Two men in suits came out and they said, "Kerry Burns?" And I said, "Yes." And they put their hands out and they said, "Homicide." And I knew.
I don't really know all that was done, but it was violent, and she never deserved that.
Amanda's mother, Claire, was living in Sydney in 1991.
I was just stunned. I just was stunned. To lose any of your children under any circumstances is hard. It's not meant to be that way. She was a ray of sunshine. She was alive. She was excited.
Amanda Burns was just 23 when she was murdered. She was in a relationship with Carol O'Mara, and they were both addicted to heroin. They supported their habit with sex work on the streets of St Kilda.
I don't think any little girl thinks to themselves, when I grow up, I want to work on the cold, dark streets of St Kilda and be spat on and abused and have to take drugs to keep myself warm inside. It's not something you would choose to do. And it becomes, a circle. You have to have the drugs to get on the street. To get the drugs, you've got to work on the street. And it's just a very, very hard thing to break. And not a life anybody would choose.
Late this afternoon, the victim was identified. Relatives are still being told. Police have appealed for public help.
As soon as police confirmed this was Amanda Burns, they began the process of retracing her steps from the night before. Can you take me through the movements?
Okay, she lived with her girlfriend in the Esquire Motel in St Kilda. The usual practice with these two ladies was they had to have a hit of heroin before they hit the streets. And the usual practice for both of them was to accompany each other to their location where they stood and waited for their clients to come along. And that was usually near the intersection of Carlisle with Barclay Street. The normal practice for Amanda and Carol, they got a client, they prefer the client to go back to the Esquire Motel where they felt safe. So that was the usual practice. But of course that didn't happen on this occasion.
Carol told police that on the night of the murder, Amanda left the Esquire Motel on her own.
Carol decided not to go with her because she said she needed to put some drops on an aching tooth. So Amanda decided to go by herself, and Carol said she'd follow up and meet her at the location where they usually stood.
It was only a few minutes' walk from the Esquire Motel to the girls' regular spot near the corner of Carlisle and Barclay Streets.
Carol did attend, but on her attendance, which she said was around midnight, Amanda was missing from her location.
So, what happened to Amanda? All we know is that a light-coloured Morris Mini panel van, like this one, pulled up in Barclay Street, and Amanda got in. We don't know if she got in willingly or under duress. But we do know that as the vehicle drove down Barclay Street towards Elwood, Amanda was desperate to get out. Where were you living at the time? I'm on the phone to Stephen Bravington, who lived in a nearby block of units. He became a crucial eyewitness to the unfolding drama in the car.
My bedroom faced Barclay Street, and I was in there just chatting with a brother and friend of his, and I heard a big bang.
Stephen ran out to the street to investigate, and what he saw shocked him.
Across the road there was a white car, and a girl was trying to get out of the passenger seat. And obviously the driver was pulling her back in. Then he ran the car into a telephone pole.
Was the door open?
The door was half open. So she obviously tried to open the door to get out. And the guy was grabbing her and ramming it up against the pole.
Amanda's attacker won the fight. He dragged Amanda back inside the vehicle and drove off around the corner into Dickens Street.
I decided to go inside, grab the car keys and go for a drive to see, because obviously there was a big problem.
And did you follow in the same direction down Dickens Street?
Yeah, I drove around for a good half an hour, 40 minutes. And yeah, I just didn't come across anything.
Amanda's killer soon brought events to a head. The minivan was seen by a security guard as it entered Elwood Park.
He had seen and described it as a minivan, a Morris minivan. He'd seen it travelling through the park at a fast rate of speed. That vehicle was seen at the Oval.
For several hours this morning, the victim's uncovered body lay within 80 metres of hundreds of people competing in the Elwood Triathlon. While many of them seemed barely aware of the grim find so close by, police were searching for clues. Senior detectives say the killing was brutal.
Her life was thrown away like a piece of rubbish. That is the hardest thing for me to live with.
I worked at the local area command of Cabramatta in southwestern Sydney, a small group of sex workers moved in looking for business. I got to know some of these girls. Each one had a different life story that brought them to the streets, but not one of them wanted to be there. So what was Amanda's story? Tell me about Amanda growing up. What was she like as a child?
She had a wicked sense of humour. And she had the biggest heart. She would give you her soul. And she was a treasure.
Where were you living back when they were children?
When they were little children, we were in Broadmeadows. It was a wonderful place to live. She adored her brother and her sister. They were all thick as thieves. They were always together and they played together. She had to do what her big brothers and sisters did.
But Amanda battled with many things in her life, like dyslexia.
When she was in grade 1, there was a play and she had to say the words, "Oh, how wonderful." And I remember it because the teacher had written it down and she couldn't actually read it. And she had it in the pocket of her dress and she used to carry it around all the time and take the bit of paper out and go, "Oh, how wonderful," which really broke my heart, really, because she couldn't read, but she just tried so hard.
It was never picked up, which made it difficult for her to be employed later on because she couldn't fill in a form. And she was told she wasn't as good as her sister and not as clever as her brother.
She suffered with low self-esteem and there was deep trauma.
Sexual assault by a family member from a very early age sort of changed her and broke her.
Amanda's parents divorced when she was in her early teens. She moved out of home when she was only 15. And when she was 20, she became a mother.
She'd had an association with the boyfriend and she had a baby boy, absolutely gorgeous child.
Amanda adored her baby boy Max, but she found it difficult to be a mum because of her stormy relationship with Max's father.
Her way out was to run over the fence and go.
Yeah.
And I think somewhere in that time was when she must have sort of started working on the street.
Amanda met Carol in Sydney's King's Cross. With a mutual dependence on heroin, they formed a relationship and moved to St Kilda. Where they continued to hustle to support their addiction, right up to the night of Amanda's murder.
Police say she had returned from Sydney recently and had been working the Ackland, Carlisle and Berkeley Streets area near the National Theatre. Police have established a caravan at the park next to the National Theatre in the hope of receiving information from the public.
We worked long hours. I think in the first 3 days we worked from morning through till 3 a.m. in the morning, trying to interview as many street girls as we could.
But the girls were reluctant to give up any information.
What I found out was most of these girls, they just couldn't survive without the dreaded heroin. Did she owe money to a dealer?
Thousands of homicides around the world have been linked to drug deals gone wrong. So that's a line of inquiry I want to pursue. Was it someone she knew grabbed her and killed her, or was it just a random attack?
That's the big question, isn't it? So these were the inconsistencies.
Julia Robson is a private investigator who's taken a very keen interest in the murder of Amanda Burns.
When we strip it all back and look at the timeline of the people that were there that night, I think the timeline actually leans more towards it being someone that Amanda may have already known.
What do you know of Amanda's movements and the people around her that night?
Well, there's two key statements from people that were there earlier in the night. One was Carol's, who was Amanda's partner, and one was from Henry, who was their dealer.
This is Henry Proudfoot. In 1991, he was a heroin dealer and user, and he was with Amanda and Carol on April 6, in the hours before Amanda was murdered. So what's Henry's version of events?
According to Henry, the night begins at 8 o'clock when Amanda and Carol drive over to his house in Preston. They spend about an hour and a half there. Some drugs were taken. It was decided that they wanted to buy more, but in order to do that, they had to return back to St Kilda to Amanda and Carol's room.
Curiously, when Carol provided a statement to police on April 7, the day Amanda's body was found, she made no mention of the trip to Preston. Instead, Carol said she and Amanda spent the night of April 6 watching TV in their room at the Esquire Motel.
She had said that they had stayed in their room up until about 10 o'clock at night, and then Henry had popped in. He had spent just a bit of time there, then he'd left.
So, in Carol's statement, she was the only other person in the motel room when Amanda hit the streets to tout for business.
Amanda had gone on ahead of Carol. Carol had hung back to fix her toothache, and then Carol had walked down the street to try and find Amanda.
Henry said he was still in the motel room when Carol returned with the news that Amanda had vanished. Carol said he wasn't in the room.
Henry had said that he'd spent the majority of the night searching with Carol for Amanda.
But that's not the way Carol remembered it.
The inconsistencies here are that Carol said she'd spent the whole night looking for Amanda on her own.
So, who to believe? Carol can't tell us. She died in 2018. Julia Robson contacted Henry Proudfoot to set the record straight. What did he tell you about that night?
I don't know if you could call it a conversation, but he certainly made it very clear that he wasn't interested in talking to me about it.
Henry Proudfoot became a key person of interest in the murder of Amanda Burns. But is he still a suspect? Hi, Caitlin. Thanks for being here today.
No problem, Deb.
Detective Caitlin Jones is leading the reinvestigation into the murder of Amanda Burns. Why is Henry Proudfoot a person of interest?
Henry Proudfoot is an associate of both Carol and Amanda. Henry was with Carol and Amanda on the night just before Amanda left the hotel. He was considered a person of interest at the start of the investigation. Investigators have spoken to him and we're happy with his story.
So would I be correct to say he's no longer a person of interest?
That's correct.
People deal with the loss of a loved one in many different ways. Amanda's brother Rowan was tragically killed in a car accident 18 months before she was murdered. Amanda was incredibly close to Rowan, and she never got over his death.
It certainly was an unhappy time, and Amanda was, of course, devastated.
When it came to lowering her brother into the ground, she hustled this burly fellow doing his job and took from him the ropes to lower him into the ground. She said as she lowered him down, it should have been me. And that was it. She was never the same. She idolised her brother. And it was very sad.
Amanda was down, but not out. Her strength of character was on full display the night she died, when her killer tried to trap her in his vehicle.
Now, she was a very little girl, but she would have fought like a tiger. And the police have told me that she certainly did fight like a tiger.
Amanda knew that getting into cars with strangers was incredibly dangerous. In fact, she'd workshopped the very scenario she found herself in.
She would say to me, if you're ever stuck in the car with anyone, always try and crash the car. From the reports I read, the car was zigzagging. And I know that she would have been doing exactly what she told me to do, and trying to crash the car and trying to kick her way out of there.
Amanda's brave fight back resulted in her killer's car scraping against a tree and a pole, leaving vital clues behind for investigators. At the scene of this accident, what was found there?
Some really key evidence. They found a couple of car parts and also a women's high-heel shoe. And that shoe was identified as belonging to Amanda and the one that she was wearing that night when she left the hotel.
Only one shoe was recovered, leading police to wonder if the missing stiletto was in fact used to bash and kill Amanda. Is it possible this could have been used as a murder weapon?
It is possible. It's a similar shape to the wad cutter that has previously been looked at by investigators, but we're open to all possibilities.
Going back to the scene of the accident on Barclay Street, I want to focus on the car parts that were sheared off when the vehicle scraped the tree and the pole.
One of the car parts was a window winder, and that window winder was identified as belonging to an early model Morris Mini panel van, which corroborates the evidence given by the witnesses.
It's entirely possible that Amanda was murdered inside the minivan before the killer dumped her naked body at Elwood Park. So the hunt was on to find the car.
A lot of evidence would be in the back of that van.
Yeah.
Blood, samples, and
Yeah.
there were probably about 1,800 of those vans registered in Victoria. So we sent out a report to every CIB division where one of these vans was registered to.
I still have those lists and they are long, but it's an important task. Somewhere in that list is what we need to know.
Police released this image of the badly battered light-coloured minivan, and that resulted in more witnesses coming forward.
The fire began at the rear of the landmark building and was well alight when fire crews arrived at 1:30 this morning.
Remember the massive fire that tore through the St Kilda town hall on the same night Amanda was murdered? Well, the public's response to the fire led to another possible sighting of the van.
There was a group of friends that got in their car and drove down to St Kilda to look at the damage that had occurred at that fire. When they were in St Kilda, there was a car that pulled up right next to them. They noticed it straight off the bat because this Morris Mini panel van was in very bad condition.
Was it the same car? And who was driving it? Henry Proudfoot has been ruled out of the police investigation, but could it have been another of Amanda's heroin dealers? 2 days before her murder, Amanda was visited at the Esquire Motel by Nikolai Marut, another dealer. Amanda was in debt to him.
Amanda owed him about $150. We understand from statements provided at the time that he had knocked on Carol and Amanda's door. They hadn't answered. And as he was leaving the Esquire Hotel, Amanda had come out and approached him. There was some level of confrontation that took place, and although it didn't go any further that night, it's understood that Nikolai was unhappy with how the conversation went.
Unhappy enough to want to kill?
When there's money involved, there's always motivation.
Did police investigate him in the initial stages of the investigation?
He was spoken to in the initial stages of the investigation and he provided a statement, and we're happy with his version of events.
And where's he now?
He passed away in 2005.
Right. To help shine a light on the 1991 murder of Amanda Burns, I'm bringing in the man I call the Homicide Whisperer. Retired New South Wales Detective Chief Inspector Wayne Hayes. I've worked closely with Wayne for many years. He's got an extraordinary record for solving major crimes.
Police surround the alleged Comanchero gang member.
Prohibited drugs have been located.
The bodies of the 60-year-old man and his 57-year-old wife were found last night.
We're treating them as a double homicide. I'm Wayne Hayes, 43 years service. I had 13 years of that in the homicide squad. You don't need to be a genius to be a homicide investigator. Homicide is all about detail. It's identifying evidence. The evidence tells a story.
Wayne's here as a sounding board. Thank you for coming in today to analyse the known facts about the murder of Amanda Burns. What has struck you about this case?
You've got almost all the information you need except the identity of the offender. You've got witnesses that see somebody in a car. You've got a car having a road accident while that person is either being pulled back in or trying to get out of the car. You've got those witnesses attempt to follow that car but lose it. Then you've got, a short time later, the same car going to a reserve where the body is discovered.
Wayne was interested in the location where the killer dumped Amanda's body. He was also interested in the fact that Amanda was found naked.
That itself is interesting because there's quite a few potentials with that. You've got sexual gratification. You've got the shock value for people finding them. That some people actually, some offenders actually like that. You know, there's a body position, so to speak, and somebody's shocked when they see it. Potentially could hinder identification.
Wayne believes Amanda's killer may have had some knowledge of police procedure, as he went to a lot of trouble to remove evidence from the scene.
Getting rid of clothes and dumping the body, it hinders any forensic potential ginormously.
The only thing the killer left behind of Amanda's clothing was one of her black fingerless gloves. At the time, police could only check it for fingerprints. But now they could check it for DNA.
That glove potentially could hold enormous DNA, right? Because obviously she'd be struggling, I would imagine, with the bad guy.
This police identikit is the only visual clue to what the killer might look like. It was compiled by Victoria Police with the help of key witnesses, including Stephen Bravington, who saw Amanda fighting to escape the minivan. Stephen struggled to commit the face of the killer to memory, and Wayne thinks he knows why.
One of the problems is what's called tunnel vision. When something happens and you're looking at it, in this case, they would have focused on a girl in a car, even though they would have seen the whole picture. They would have been focusing on the girl in the car because that's where the action was, that's what they were looking at.
A key aspect of this investigation is whether Amanda was targeted by someone she knew as Julia Robson suggests, or a random stranger. Wayne is open to either scenario.
There's other possibilities here that cannot be excluded per se.
Victoria Police have excluded two of Amanda's dealers, Henry Proudfoot and Nikolai Marut, as persons of interest in their investigation. But what about Amanda's girlfriend Carol? She told police she stayed behind in the motel to treat a toothache when Amanda went out alone. Is there any inference that could be drawn from that?
You could use an inference that maybe Carol knew something was going to happen.
Let's go back to the facts as understood by the police so far. We know that Amanda was seen looking for clients in St Kilda on or around midnight on the night of her murder.
Amanda had been seen at that location by another street worker, and they'd had a conversation near a Shell service station near the intersection of Barclay with Carlisle Street. And that street worker took a client and disappeared, and Amanda was still sitting at that location.
The street worker whose witness account police have relied upon did not see Amanda get into the minivan. However, another street worker by the name of Wendy Lunt told police that she did see Amanda get into the killer's car.
So Wendy's statement is interesting. It's very detailed. It was taken a few weeks after Amanda's body was found.
Wendy knew Amanda and Carol as they all worked the same beat in St Kilda. What Wendy told police she saw on the night of Amanda's murder is very interesting, because Wendy places Carol at the scene with Amanda just before Amanda got into the minivan.
At some stage she saw Carol kind of indicate that she was going for a short period of time, and Amanda stayed there alone.
And soon after that, the minivan pulled up.
Wendy went and spoke to this John first, decided that he was a time waster, and Amanda ended up approaching the vehicle, decided that she was going to take the ride, apparently turned to Wendy and said, "Tell my friend I'll be back soon," and then ended up getting into the vehicle and the vehicle drove off.
Wendy has made a number of statements, but one thing that's consistent in her statements is that she says that Carol was either with Amanda or in close proximity to her on the night that she was murdered. What do you think about that?
That's Wendy's version of events that she's provided. We don't have anything else that corroborates that at this time.
According to Wendy, Carol's behaviour that night was suspicious. Do you think Carol could have been involved in the murder of Amanda?
I think that's Wendy's opinion, and that's fine. That's what's in her statement. However, we're not taking that line.
I don't think Carol was involved. There's clearly a man that is responsible for Amanda's death. Do I think Carol knows more than she said? Yes, I do. I think there are a lot of secrets about this case that haven't been revealed yet.
There's one more thing I want to talk to Wayne about. Among the many violent crimes against sex workers, two unsolved murders, Samantha Mizzi and Tracy Connolly. They too were murdered in St Kilda in a very brutal way.
Two other prostitutes murdered in the same location. That in itself slightly adds to the mystery of this.
Amanda Burns is not the only street worker to die at the hands of a murderer in St Kilda. Sadly, many other women have suffered a similar fate, including two other unsolved killings, Samantha Mizzi and Tracy Connolly.
Samantha Louise Mitzi left her 2 children behind in Malden in central Victoria to work in St Kilda on Monday. Just after midnight, a fellow prostitute discovered Samantha unconscious.
At the time she was found, she had severe head injuries and was naked.
Samantha had been brutally bashed with a blunt instrument, stripped naked and left to die. Less than 12 hours later, she passed away in hospital. Victoria Police have acknowledged similarities in the way that Samantha Mizzi and Amanda Burns were murdered. And there's another connection. Samantha Mizzi's older sister was good friends with Amanda's sister, Kez.
Now, when Amanda was murdered in 1991, one of the friends that consoled her was Samantha Mizzi.
The Mizzi family also paid their respects by posting a tribute to Amanda in the Melbourne Age.
They were not to know that 3 years later, their families would be bound by tragedy.
This Ford O'Connor van was where Tracy Connolly lived and worked in St Kilda. It was also the scene of her brutal murder.
The murder of 40-year-old sex worker Tracy Connolly is another unsolved homicide that Victoria Police are keen to crack.
The male offender has not totally left the scene though. He's left part of his identity behind in the form of his DNA profile and finger and palm print.
Victoria Police have told us they have nothing linking the 3 incidents at this time. However, as part of their push to find the killers, they've offered significant rewards, including a $1 million reward to help solve Tracy Connolly's murder.
A sense of justice would bring some peace and some closure for those of us who knew her.
I'm heading back to Victoria Police Headquarters in Spencer Street. Over the years, I've worked with Victoria Police many times on cross-border investigations. But today is different. Good to see you again, Paul.
Good to see you, Deb.
Detective Senior Sergeant Paul Scarlett manages a team of detectives in the Homicide Squad Cold Case Unit. And I understand that you have an announcement to make in relation to the murder of Amanda Burns.
Yes, I do. In relation to the murder of Amanda Burns, the Chief Commissioner has approved a $1 million reward. That's open to any person that rings up with that information that we're looking for that will result in the arrest of an offender and conviction at court.
And how can $1 million reward help solve a case?
I think $1 million is still a lot of money in anybody's language, so it might just be that edge that somebody's looking for. I would urge anybody that is holding any information about the Amanda Burns murder to ring up whether you think we know that information or not.
At the time of Amanda's murder, she was working on the streets and addicted to heroin. Women like Amanda were not welcomed by many of the residents of St Kilda. They made their views clear in meetings at the City Hall.
No one seems to be taking into consideration that we are residents.
What am I going to do when I'm trying to sleep at night and I can't get to sleep because I've got people arguing out the front about a sex deal? What do? Go out there with my hose?
So where did that leave the sex workers on the streets of St Kilda at the time of Amanda's murder? Addicted to drugs, marginalised by society, and vulnerable in every sense of the word. It's not surprising they weren't cooperative when police came knocking. Do you believe perhaps there's people that know what happened that aren't speaking out of fear or other reasons?
I really do believe that. When Amanda was there, I'd find, some of the girls that she worked with would come and talk to me. Sometimes they were hard, but other times they were so childlike. And what they have to put up with is extraordinary. The violence and the disrespect. Carloads of boys from the suburbs coming in, yelling, spitting at them from windows, throwing bottles at them, calling them names. And yet they pick themselves up. Sure, they take drugs. And they go and do it again.
We've touched on the heartbreaking stories of 3 women who were brutally murdered on the streets of St Kilda. These 3 women were mothers, and the children left behind had to grow up without them.
She looks like Sadie, the cleaning lady.
Samantha Mizzi left a son and a 4-year-old daughter behind. Tracy Connolly was estranged from her family, but she had children too. And Amanda Burns was mum to little Max.
I'm not out for justice too much. It's justice for her. It's not for me, it's for her.
I've arranged to meet with Amanda's only child, Max. He was just 3 years old when his mum was brutally murdered. It's lovely to meet you, Max.
G'day, Deb, how are you?
Thanks for coming in and having a talk with me today.
It's no worries.
What has your family told you about your mum?
I know she had pretty good taste. You know, she had a certain sense of style. Very artistic and very caring and nurturing, and I don't know, she'd go into battle for a lot of people. Well loved. She was a fun person to be around.
Any death is a tragedy, but to be brutally murdered the way your mum was, I mean, that would have been really hard for you.
That's a horrible thing to do to someone. Like, that's going to war. You know what I mean? Like, it's horrific. That's the thing that kind of hits hard. It makes you angry. For me, it made me angry as a young person growing up, and you blame yourself for some stuff. But I don't want to get angry about it.
Yeah.
You know, and I want to try and have a positive note on things.
Yeah.
You know, that's the best thing you can do. You have to accept it. You know, it's just something you have to accept.
Max is a remarkably well-adjusted young man living a full life. He's bought a house and he's got a great job. But Max is also painfully aware of the trauma that his mother, Amanda, endured, right up until the day she died.
She was using hard drugs.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, if you're 18, 19 and you're using heroin and you're working on the street in prostitution, that's pretty serious shit. There's some stuff going on in the back of her life that's pushed her into that. I've been told that she had been abused by my family member, which is not something I really like to hear about. That's pretty upsetting. That's almost as upsetting as the incident itself. I'd say she was probably struggling and suffering in silence quite significantly, yeah.
Max lives in Brisbane and only occasionally comes to Melbourne to see family.
It was unsettling the first time I come down here on my own. When I'm down here and I'm around St Kilda, I do give it some thought. I was actually listening to music that she used to listen to and like around here in St Kilda this morning, just to, you know, get a bit of a feel of how things were for her. So.
And what sort of music was it?
Well, I know she liked bands, Aussie bands, like weddings, parties, anything, and she did like Sonic Youth and a few like, indie bands and stuff like that. So she had nice taste in music. I like the same sort of thing, so yeah.
Amanda was a fighter, right until the bitter end. At the age of 23, she was working hard to overcome her childhood dyslexia by teaching herself to read.
When I was gathering her things after she had died, there was a book I'd given her. It was George Orwell's Animal Farm, because I told her about this book and I was lucky enough to go to university. Now, I didn't see this book until after she died. And I opened it up and all these words were underlined and marked and I could just see her sitting there all the words she didn't know that she had to look up, and she finished that book. I didn't, at the time, realise how hard that would have been to finish that book until I found that book afterwards with all these underlined things and cornered pages and just... she was tough.
I have, over the years, learned to be grateful for having had such a person in my life. She was a strong fighter, and she fought to help people and do things, and never ever got to achieve what she was put on this world to do.
Kerry, what do you hope a show like this might achieve for you and your family?
It certainly would be peaceful, not to be wondering all the time, who is this person, what have they done, and then the anger you feel. For Amanda, it would show that her life was worth something.
There's a lot of people who want to solve this case, and maybe you can help. If you know who was driving the minivan that night in 1991, or if you know who this man might be, get in touch with Crime Stoppers. $1 million reward has been offered for any information. How do you think that can assist?
Well, money's a motivator, isn't it? So hopefully that might drive someone. I'm not out for justice too much. It's justice for her. It's not for me. It's for her. You know, she was a good person and she deserved better than that.